Hi, this is Sid. I'm CEO and co-founder at GitLab. And today I'm here with Fabio. We're going to talk about security and license gates in GitLab. Fabio?
Yeah, thank you, Sid. I'm Fabio, product manager for the secure stage. So I'm very focused on the security things and listening to what our users want from our features and what we see as the future of our product. So today, I just want to discuss with you about security gates. This is a feature proposal for now and quite strong. This is a good solution for both us and our customers, and it is aligned with our principles. And I want to get more feedback and start a conversation with that before we engage engineers and we start adding more details. So the security gates are the answer for all the people that are asking for a way to ensure that security is really checked before a merge request is merged into the master branch. So at the moment, because of our security paradigm, we don't block a merge request if a vulnerability is found in the merge request, because it could be a false positive, or people just don't want to be stopped by this process. There is a growing request that compliance really need to have a look at this merge request. Security directors and security engineers want to be sure that they are not introducing very important vulnerable code into the master branch. And so the proposal is a way to allow them to do that, but not as a default. And I explain it a little better. The idea is that with security gates, you can set up approvers for the merge request that are enabled automatically only if a specific case is raised. In this case, for example, if you have security vulnerabilities, additional approvers for the merge request are added to the merge request. So you can merge the merge request without any security people to look at it if you don't introduce new possible problems. But if you do so, the security team is pinged and they will approve explicitly your merge request. And I want to build this feature on top of our approvers feature that we already have at GitLab. So we can reuse a lot of the flow, a lot of code probably, and make it simple. So people don't need to learn something new, but they can leverage something that is already in the product. And my idea is that you set it up at the project level, or in the future at the group level also, and say, if security vulnerabilities are found in the merge request when you push any commit, then this rule will be enabled. And you target a rule that is one of the approver rules that can define a set of people or a GitLab group. In this case, obviously, it will be probably the security team group. And so you are sure that the right people will take a look at the merge request before you can merge it. What do you think about that, Sid?
I think that I totally understand that our customers want to make sure that they're not shipping vulnerable code to production. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. I want to talk about the rate of false positives that our scans have. I want to talk about how people deal with a shipped positive. So things might not be vulnerable when you ship them to production, but they might be vulnerable after you might become vulnerable after you ship them. There might be a vulnerability that's discovered, and now your code in production is vulnerable. And I think we should have one way of treating both. So if we focus on preventing shipping vulnerable code, we miss this entire other class of things, which might be much higher impact. I want to talk about impact levels. Like, not every vulnerability is created equal. Some are more severe than others. I want to talk about how we deal with previous cases. So if something has been approved by the security team before, if that vulnerability is encountered again with a different team, how does GitLab deal with that? And whether there's discretion for example, the developers, where they can say, hey, this vulnerability does not apply to my code, and they can give an explanation, and they can proceed without where their explanation is checked after the fact and not before the fact. Because, for example, you might have a case where the vulnerability is lower priority than the website being down. And I want to talk about a case where the production code is vulnerable already. So it's not a new case. It's the vulnerability exists in production. They're making a change. The change is it detects a vulnerability in our scans, but it doesn't change anything. So could you? I wrote these up. Can you walk me through how you think about each of these 6 cases?
Yep, absolutely. So let's start with the first one. So false positives. At the moment, what I can say is that the false positive rate is the one provided by the tools that we are using. So at the moment, we are using different tools. Each of these tools has different false positive rates. For some of those, they are quite low. For some of those, they are quite high. So we cannot consider that we are safe from false positives. And
Okay.
that's very important, even because the tool itself, for example, if you do SAST analysis, is able to analyze the source code, but not the production effects of this code. So it's not really possible to be sure 100% that the code will be vulnerable in production. This is more a mix of different scans and different experience from the security team that can determine if the code is really vulnerable or not once deployed. We have a proposal to improve this and to better understand the code path. So if the vulnerability is really impacting the flow that the code is doing or not. For example, a vulnerable library may have just one function vulnerable, and maybe this function is never called by your application. So in this case, you are not affected by this vulnerability. And it should not be part of a threat management, because you just don't care about the vulnerable function. Unfortunately, we are not at that level yet, but we hope to be in the future. So at the moment, we still have false positive due to this as well. Then going to the second point, shipped positives. Yeah, and I think the probably impact levels can be packed together in one single answer. So yes, this is something that is very difficult to evaluate in an automated way. So that's more something that people, developers, and the security team should consider case by case. And that's why I think that when you have to, take a decision in the security space, it's always some manual process should be there in very critical cases. So that's why we don't want to block entirely the merge request, or we want to allow it without any check. But having an approver set allows people to discuss, to check, to verify case by case, and to easily unlock with just pressing a button instead of setting up different rules or hacking the process. So the process will allow manual ways to unblock it very easily, and that's the key point.
So you're saying that none of the tools that we use give a level of severity?
Oh yeah, sorry, I see that. Yeah, tools give severity, but at the moment we don't treat vulnerabilities differently based on the severity. So severity is reported in the reports, and this will allow security engineers and developers to figure out which is the impact the vulnerability may have in production. In the issue about security gates, I put as a possibility to consider only a certain degree of severity to be blocker for the merge request, for all this process to happen. So for example, if you have only low priority, low severity vulnerabilities, the additional approver will not be enabled. But if you have medium or maybe critical, absolutely, this process will jump in. In this way, we still are, we are saying that we are fine shipping low severity vulnerabilities without blocking the process, But if it's critical or if it's high, no, at that point, we really want the security team to jump in and to unlock it by approving the merge request.
I think that makes a lot of sense. To let's start with, like, for example, only critical ones, and let's take it from there and see how that goes. The other thing is, like, what if it becomes positive in production? Like, you already shipped something and then it becomes vulnerable. How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's, say, out of scope for security gates, but is absolutely in scope for continuous security checking. So then this is a different proposal. We continue to check vulnerabilities in production in order to provide an up-to-date security status for the master branch or for the deployed application. In case we find problems, new vulnerabilities that have been added to the database, for example, very recently, the security team will be notified. But in this case, they will not go on the merge request widget. They will go to the security dashboard and to the overall security status of the project to know this information. So it's still accessible, but not in the merge request.
Okay. And how do you think about using previous decisions? So the security team approved previous vulnerabilities, like, hey, it doesn't apply or something. How can you reuse that?
Yeah, I think that this is very specific for the kind of vulnerability. So I see it very possible, for example, for dependency scanning. In this case, there could be a pre-screening of the library and other security bugs that are out, and this could be pre-approved. For other in-context things like SAST vulnerabilities, I find that this could be more difficult, even if still possible. But probably it depends how much a pre-approved rule can apply to the same occurrences of the same vulnerability. Because the problem, I feel, is that pre-approved rules can be on vulnerabilities intended as high-level vulnerabilities, while normally what you approve in the merge request is the case-by-case occurrence of a vulnerability inside that specific line of code. And that's only possible when you have the code committed to the merge request.
Okay. And what do you think of a comply or explain thing, where you can explain why something doesn't apply in this case, and that can be reviewed by security people after the fact so that you're not blocked?
Yeah, that's also something that we have been asked. At the moment, when you dismiss a vulnerability as a developer, you don't have a way to provide any sort of reason why you're doing that. And that's something that is really useful for security teams if they are not able to take a look immediately to have a track in the future. So what we can do is to have something that is absolutely optional. So you're not forced to provide this kind of feedback. But if you want, when you dismiss a vulnerability, you can provide. And this will remove the vulnerability as a false positive, but will also allow security teams that have access to dismissed vulnerabilities to check if it was the right choice from a security standpoint, and eventually to revert the decision and to provide a remediation or any warning that will put your application in a better security state.
Okay, so even with the security gates, the developers can still dismiss them, and then you can pass the security gates.
Yeah, that's because it's a conscious choice. Even if we are really considering if about the dismissal process, because it's something that could be abused by developers. So we need to find the right balance between not blocking pipelines and the flow, and provide the right way of compliance. Personally, I feel that introducing the uppers for security problems is a very good first step, first MVC, and then we can get more feedback about that and understand with customers if this is enough if they see some possible problem in the flow. They are disconnected from a technical point of view, so they can be built separately.
Okay. And what do you think about you have production code that's vulnerable. You're making a change. It doesn't change the vulnerability of the code, but it's still vulnerability. How do you think about dealing with that?
So you mean you're not introducing something new because the vulnerability is already
Correct.
in the original. Or in this case, the merge request widget will not consider this vulnerability at all, because merge request is dealing with the diff between the vulnerabilities in the master branch and vulnerabilities in the merge request. So in the diff, the vulnerability will not be there because it will deny itself with the two occurrences. And so this process will not apply at all.
Oh. Thanks for the context. I think in general, we should make sure that it's very kind of user-friendly to make decisions. I think instead of, the tools will never be perfect. You will always have false positives. So it should be as low friction as possible for people to communicate about these vulnerabilities. So we should think of ourselves not as enforcing something, but as a communication facilitator. And I think, for example, in the web application firewall space, you see companies that have done that said, hey, there's no one size fits all companies. Companies have to make their own decisions, and we facilitate that conversation. Those are doing much better than the ones that try to make it technically perfect. So I think we should think of this as a collaboration tool much more than something that can be technically perfect.
Yep, makes sense. Okay, if you're okay with this topic, I just want to address very briefly the second one, that is about license management and how it is different from what we just discussed. So in my understanding, license management should be considered more like a failed test, so unit test or integration test, in case users want to enforce licenses to be compliant with the rules. The main reason is that we cannot have a lot of false positives in license management, because licenses are written in files. And if you have a file with a license in your project, that's 99.9% of the license of your code. So we are very better to detect the licenses. And if someone at the group level or at the project level, a maintainer, an owner, stated that they really don't want that specific license to be part of the app, of the project, I see not a lot of reasons to say, oh, maybe it's a false positive, maybe the decision was wrong. And so I think that in this case, we can stop the merge request at the same way when you have a red pipeline. And so obviously this is optional. So users can enable this enforcement or not in the merge request settings, like they do for the red pipeline. And also there is a way to merge the merge request manually if they really need to unblock fast, like we have for the red pipeline. But even if license management is developed by the secure team, I see it more a compliance thing. And so I don't see it's breaking our security paradigm if we go this way.
So you want to break the build instead of having a person approve?
Yeah, exactly.
So suppose...
Oh, sorry, sorry, just to be clear, it's not really breaking the build. It's more like blocking the merge request to be allowed to merge. So all the jobs in the pipeline will run anyway, and you just have, or you cannot merge the merge request because there is a license mismatch.
And why not add the person, or why not add the person as an approver, like the person who made that blocked, who added that to the block list? Why not add that person as an approver?
Yeah, I see the two main reasons, because this could be not an optimal solution. The first one is that it requires more configuration, setting up the rule instead of just checking a flag that is saying I want to enforce licenses to be compliant. So it could be more aligned with the conventions over the configuration. And the second point is that since we want to provide this capability also at the group level, it becomes more complex to manage approvers from the merge request, given the group license can define rules and the project licenses can also apply rules. And so the approver has really to have a good understanding of all the chain, and it could be sub-projects and these kind of things. So it makes a little more complex. And I don't see the reason at the beginning. So let's say it's more complex and not really needed, in my opinion. But that's an option as well, obviously.
Okay. So let me talk about a scenario. I have an e-commerce application, and it's essential to our business, but it's mature. No development is happening, and we do a totally separate part of the company. There's a review of all the licenses we should use, and we decide that GPL licenses are not good for our business. So instituted at every group in the company, from now on, all the GPL licenses are on our blacklist. Now, 3 months later, this e-commerce app breaks. There's something in, I don't know, something went wrong and the app breaks. And the only way to fix it is to improve the code. However, this app already contained GPL licenses. Now, I cannot merge my fix, even though I'm losing $1 million an hour, because this license is not approved. Was there before, still is there, not making anything worse. But someone put it on the blacklist a couple of months ago. We haven't removed any of them. How would the system deal with that?
Yeah, if I got it correctly, if the license has already been used by any other component in the same project, it will not show in the merge request, because also license management is doing the diff between the licenses used in the master branch and the licenses used in the feature branch. So it will not be a new license, but an existing license. So the block rule will not apply to it.
Okay, and so Fabio, one of my dependencies already was GPL licensed, except that they now added a license file that is detected by GitLab. So to GitLab, it looks as a new license.
Okay, but yeah, the idea is that we don't consider the license, it's the dependent itself, we consider the license. So you blacklist or approve the license, not the dependency using the license. So if you, that's the only case there is that you have no other dependencies with that specific license, and then it appears new. This is a possible case, and in this case, you will be able to override the rule for your application to say, okay, I approve this license.
You can override it.
You cannot. You say as a developer, you cannot do it in the merge request widget. But if you are a project maintainer, so you can ping a project maintainer to do that, and they can approve it for a specific group, for a specific project, even if the blacklist rule is set at the group level. So projects have independency on what they can approve or not. And this is still under discussion, and we are considering if we want to make it customizable for groups. So a group can say, all my projects have to use absolutely this set of licenses as the blacklist, or if they allow maintainers for specific projects to override the group policy. Say this is a strong suggestion, but then maintainers have more freedom on their specific projects.
Okay, thanks for that. Well, thanks for the conversation, Fabio.
Yeah, thank you, Sid.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thank you.